Thanks for joining us here in the in the revitalization team panel. We're going to get started because we do not want to keep the governor waiting, because he won't wait. He'll just go, and then we'll be starting here. Hi Nicole, yeah. Hi. I was just telling them how hard it can be to navigate the college campus, and thanks for making the time today. So as we kind of went over today in the program, what we wanted to get into here is a different take on the recovery process, and maybe not so focused on the revitalization aspects, not so focused on the rebuilding aspects in terms of infrastructure, in terms of housing, but how do we build an economy that not only is responsive to the needs of people because of what happened due to the fires and maybe future loss, but how do we build an economy here in LA and in the region that supports economic mobility broadly, like from a workforce, from a capital access, from a jobs and an industry cluster standpoint. So what we've done here is brought together a few leaders that kind of encompass that framework, from financial services, from governance, and from education, to get a bit of sense of how we can develop this more dynamic economic model, what's working, and then how do we pull it all together moving forward. So I think everybody got a program, right? Hold it up if you got the blue program today. All of the bios and the speakers are in there, so in terms of time, we'll just jump right into it. And I'll start with my friend Chris. Chris, from a governance standpoint, I think you guys are kind of in the hot seat right now in terms of the fire impact and from a streamlining kind of imperative and government permitting standpoint. But talk to us a bit about what you guys were doing before the pandemic in terms of supporting capital access, supporting innovation hubs, and maybe some of the role that you play in driving more of that activity to the region.
Right, thank you for that, man. Thank you for having me on the panel. As we talk about what the Office of California's Office of the Small Business Advocate, we're a division within GoBiz, and our charge is to be the voice of small businesses. And so we do that through a few different means, but really what we have to do is really do some regional mapping and understand where the gaps are that exist within our regions. And I have a territory from Ventura County to the border of Mexico and east to Arizona and Nevada. And so with that, I have multiple sub-ecosystems within those. And so what we try to do is understand where the gaps are, listen to the small business owners, really listen and take that feedback and develop strategies to fill those gaps. And so as I speak about the innovation hubs, what we know California is the leader in innovation. We get a lot of VC capital to the state. However, as you kind of lift the hood under that and you talk about the support for the small innovators, those folks that are working out of their garage, those folks that are just building capital, they're bootstrapping, right? What is the pathway for those individuals to become successful, access the resources that are needed? And so we recognize the gap on the state side that we weren't, I guess the right term to put it is we hadn't done enough efforts to raise the awareness to where a significant amount of businesses could understand. So we went through some initiatives through the pandemic. Obviously, through that period, we had some relief funding that went out, and we provided over $4 billion in grants to over 360,000 small businesses during the pandemic period. But at the same time, we were still developing our regional ecosystem plan. So I'll start with the Accelerate California program, which is designed to create regional economic ecosystems targeted around innovators within the region. And so what that really means is ensuring that our small innovators have the resource providers, the access to the subject matter expertise, the capital that's necessary, and understanding who those capital players are. And so we developed a framework built around 5 pillars that will ensure that each of our regions give them a target so that they can achieve that growth. And what we talk about from the Los Angeles perspective is high density, right? So we could go anywhere from clean tech, we could go manufacturing. There's a lot of different focal points. And so what we've targeted within the LA region since the pandemic period is one, healthcare, health access, and biotechnologies through this innovation hub, and then secondly, through clean energy and clean tech initiatives through partners like LAEDC, LARDA, and Plug-in Ventures, also known as Plug-in South LA. And so through those efforts, we work through those entities as trusted messengers that are ingrained in these communities to provide the support mechanisms so these entrepreneurs can get access to the resources they need so they can grow. So we focused in those areas as it pertains to Los Angeles County, and it's not like we start day one and everything's there. It's a progressive type of approach, and so as you go year to year, you identify gaps, and so obviously capital being the biggest of them, but there are other elements that we work towards to ensure that these companies can grow. And so just a reference through the Accelerate California hubs, just this past fiscal year, we did over $600 million in economic impact. 530 million or so of those dollars went directly into the hands of small businesses, either through debt equity or non-dilutive capital, primarily around the Small Business Innovation Research Program. And so we put our money where our mouth is, and in addition to that, I have about $7 million in direct funds for those participating organizations. So we're also providing seed capital to those businesses while also building the ecosystem around them so they have the wraparound services. And so we do that through trusted messengers. We just don't have the manpower. So I'll stop there.
No, I think that's a really interesting place you left it off at. I think government really has a hard time tooting its own horn and singing its own praises. I mean, I think your office has one of the more successful small business support mechanisms in the is it the
scale? Right, with the scale network, and so with the scale network, we got tired of talking about individual programs. Like, hey, this program is targeted to this group, this program is targeted to that group, and then after you got 14 programs, you start talking over yourself, right? So we did a rebrand of what our network is, and we talked about it as scale. So it doesn't matter what type of entrepreneur, what industry sector focus, we have a wide range of providers and multiple networks that can support these businesses as they evolve. So it doesn't matter what, we call them on-ramps, doesn't matter what stage of business, what their needs are. We feel strongly that we have providers that can support those needs. And so with the Scale Network, it's taken, through the leadership of Director Tara Lynn Gray, a huge, monstrous effort to bring in over 150 partners statewide that provide these services in a myriad of areas. And so a lot of the folks better than me. I'm working out of Sacramento, but at the same time, these folks are in your communities doing this work. And so those are the folks we lean on. And I'll stop there.
No, thanks so much. I think in general we tend to talk about access to capital and the along public-private partnerships and CDFIs as like magical fairy dust that you can sprinkle on problems and they go away. And luckily we're joined by Nicole and Jeffrey who can shine a little bit more light on how we can work more in concert with some of these capital providers, how it fits in, and what their role is. So Nicole, I'll start with you. From leading LISC LA and looking at your role in community impact. What do you see the role is as the CDFI loan fund, and what are you looking to support and shape from a lending and from a small business, from a place-based? How does that look for you?
Well, first off, thank you for having me.
Thank you
and for your patience. I told Matt on Monday, I'm not good with college campuses. I haven't been since I was in college. I can never navigate a college campus. I am almost sure to get lost. So anyway, thank you all for your patience. I'm so happy to see a full room today. And before I start sort of answering that question, just to give you a little bit of sense of who I am and who LISC/LISC LA is. So I am the executive director of LISC LA. We've been in, LISC nationally has been in existence for about 40 years. We've been in Los Angeles for about 37 years. And in that time, we put about $149 million in the market when it comes to our lending around small business, around affordable housing, and also providing programming around economic development in its various forms. Our intention is to double that investment over the next 5 to 7 years, and the rebuild of LA, particularly Altadena, will be a big part of that investment over the next 5 to 7 years in that investment horizon. So we're super excited about the work that we do already in LA. We were excited in December, and now that work has changed and will likely double due to what happened to our region and our communities in January. So what place does, what part does CDFIs and loan funds, where do they participate? And I appreciate you, Matt, for pointing out that we are a loan fund, meaning that we are not a deposit-taking entity. So we're not taking in deposits and then lending them back out like banks and like MDIs. We are a CDFI loan fund, which means that we take capital, debt capital from banks, and then we lend it back out. Our mission and our mandate is to lend out responsibly, meaning that whatever rate that we lend out to our end borrower, it should be responsible. And so what we try to do is be as thoughtful as possible on the front end as we're taking in capital. So we're taking it in at a rate that we're lending it out at a place where you can handle it. So you're not getting a 13, 15. I've seen really interesting interest rates from a lot of lenders who have to manage their own cost of capital. And so we try to do that in a really smart way and really try to blend down rates with grant capital such that when we're lending out to small businesses, to developers, et cetera, we're doing that at a rate where it's manageable and we're holding down your cost of capital so you can go and invest in other parts of your business. So that's one important part that we play, is to lend responsibly. And so, I spent 10 years working at JP Morgan before I got to LISC. LISC was actually my client when I was at JP Morgan. So it's been interesting to be internal to the organization and kind of see how it all works, and to be on the nonprofit side. I spent a lot of years in banking, and before that I worked for the mayor of LA along with Stephen Chung. So had a varied background, and this job has allowed me to bring that all together. But I think what's important to know about CDFIs is that we do operate differently than a bank, where in that we can overcome things that banks cannot when they're trying to underwrite you, right? So particularly when they're trying to underwrite an early stage small business which has inherent risk. So what we try to do is look beyond that risk that's inherent to you being sort of early stage small business, right? And so we look at, well, what's the track record of the borrower? It could be that this is your first time starting this business, but you already worked in this industry for 20 years. That means something to us. We could look at, okay, this borrower has a little bit of criminal history. A bank, I can tell you, when I was underwriting these loans, full stop, you stop right there. There's no more conversation beyond that, because they've got so many, they've got regulations that they've got to follow around that. We're able to transcend a lot of criminal history, so we're able to give people a second chance. I've seen deals where someone comes in and they've got tax liens. A lot of times they didn't even know that it was on their business. Again, bank, full stop, end of conversation. Us, we're able to say, okay, what is this? Did you know that this was there? Let's figure out, a plan for you to pay that down so that you can take on the debt that you need to grow your business. So there's a lot of things that a CDFI can overcome in underwriting that a bank cannot, by virtue of the way that they're underwritten. And that is the point of CDFIs. We should get to places in the community in terms of lending that a bank cannot, and that's why they send us capital to do that work. They're, at least right now, federally mandated to do that work, to lend to communities that are underinvested. I don't know what the right term is now in this new political environment, but whatever those communities are, that when you're not able to walk into a bank branch and get a yes from an underwriter or from a lender, we should sit in that space and take and hold that space for you. And so that is our work to do every day. I think what's interesting about the CDFI ecosystem is that it is an ecosystem, and there are large CDFIs like us. We're the largest CDFI by loan assets, and then there's smaller regional CDFIs, some of them that I banked when I was at JP Morgan, and I absolutely love the work that they do. And we all need each other because there are CDFIs that can take on more risk than we can. Sometimes we participate in a loan with them, where we'll take up a big chunk of the capital, and so will they, but they're sort of absorbing a lot of risk for us because we are publicly rated, and so we do have to be thoughtful about that. But our job as a CDFI is to do what a bank cannot do in terms of taking up more risk, helping small businesses, helping early sort of emerging developers get out there, get going. So hopefully by the time you get to the end of repayment with us, you're ready to walk into a Chase, a Wells, et cetera, and walk right in there and get the lending that you need. So the life cycle of a CDFI and your work with us should be that we're in the earlier stage of your business life cycle, because that's when you're the riskiest. And then as your business grows, as you grow as a borrower and you've got track record, your business has track record, then you should be at a point, we should be graduating you to a point where you're bank ready. So we want to make sure that you're CDFI ready, and then we should be graduating you to bank readiness. And that's sort of our place in the life cycle of capital provision.
Yeah. So like from a public policy standpoint, you would encourage maybe institutions like this, or maybe at an LAEDC level, to really double down on the technical assistance, the financial kind of literacy that we hear a lot about that maybe gets glossed over to get businesses or entrepreneurs in a state of readiness. I know the state might support some of that stuff. Does that resonate with you, Nicole?
Yes, this is the magical fairy dust.
This is
It's
the
the work before you get to the capital.
Yep.
Preparation for access to capital there's nothing more important. Because whether you're getting lending from us or from a bank, whatever, the process is exactly the same. And that's the thing I think is most shocking to people. They're like, you're a CDFI, I should just be able to walk up, fill out the application, and that's that. No, we still need all the same documents that you would need for Chase. We just underwrite them differently. So you still need to have your tax returns, because at this point you're probably not doing audited financials just yet, except that they're being audited by the IRS. So your audited financials at this point of the life cycle of your business would be your tax return, both you as a business and as an individual. What I see a lot is that there's a mismatch in those two documents, and they should flow. So if you're telling us that your business made $1 million and you as the owner took $100,000 in salary, then we should see that flow through, that there's payout on your business tax return, and then you're picking up income as the individual at that same amount on your personal tax return. What we often see is there's a mismatch there, and then that immediately sort of triggers a ton of questions. So what you want to do is have all your financial documents settled, have your bookkeeping on point all the time, and such that once you get to a point where you're ready for capital, you've got all your financials in place. The other thing I would say is, and this is harder to do because you got to be really thinking forward, but you got to prepare for capital access the way you would prepare to buy a house, right? So if you're knowing you're not buying a house for 2 years, it's like, okay, I'm going to try to minimize my tax liability as much as I can, because that's the smart thing to do. But I've seen people do that to the point where they're not showing almost any income, and then we can't underwrite them because you're not showing a way that you could service the debt. So if you know, okay, in a year, 2 years, I want to be going for, a $250,000 loan for my business, okay, then you need to manage your tax liability such that you're showing the ability to repay debt. So all of those things that's the magical fairy dust. The magic is the time to prepare. You've got to prepare, because once you come into the underwriting process unprepared, it gets really hairy, and it's an unpleasant experience for you and for us, to be honest.
I call it the eat your vegetables approach. Like, we have to, if you want to grow big and strong, you gotta, at least what I tell my kids, they don't listen either. And Nicole, I'm glad you brought up this CDFI in an ecosystem, because Jeffrey, you've really displayed a lot of leadership in leveraging this community development financial impact model in a different way. And I'd love for you to talk a bit more about how you've bridged this corporate social responsibility gap, and what Charter is doing to increase investment in the communities that you serve, and how it relates to this region.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for having me as well. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to address on this panel. My name is Jeff Buller. I've been with Charter for the past 8 years, since 2017. Prior to that, just by way of background, I had a career on Wall Street where I was managing a hedge fund for 14 years, where we invested in distressed debt, newly originated debt, bonds, and bank loans. And obviously, the focus at the hedge fund level was to get those 15 to 20% type of returns. We focused on financial returns. I came over to Charter right at the precipice of the merger with Time Warner Cable and White House Networks. And it was an unbelievable time in Charter, because we were and are a Fortune 100 company, but yet we were entrepreneurially spirited in the sense that we were figuring things out. And there was a document that guided us as we were merging, and it talked about community investment. When I came over, I was given this document, and community investment at the time, and probably most of the time, was talking about contributions and donations and grants to business development organizations, to very important other organizations, chambers of commerce. I decided to take it a little bit differently and literally invest in our communities, in those small businesses. And that was the beginnings of the Spectrum Community Investment Loan Fund, where we built an impact fund on our balance sheet to invest in small businesses through CDFIs. Now, I will give LISC full credit, because back in 2017, when I did not know what a CDFI was, I read a white paper that was published by LISC. And the strength and the power and the distribution ability of a CDFI is unparalleled. Because we weren't going to invest as a Fortune 100 company with a very large balance sheet. We were not going to invest directly in the equity or debt of Ray's Pizzeria, for instance. However, we have since 2017 developed a portfolio of investments in CDFIs across the country. We have over $30 million of investments in CDFIs. We are across 21 states. Our only requirement of the CDFI is that they invest the dollars we invest in them in our network. So we ubiquitously cover Los Angeles and the surrounding areas. It is so Southern California is one of our most major areas and geographies. And so we have invested heavily in the area through CDFIs. So far, we have created hundreds of jobs, and we have made loans that have almost exceeded $2 million in loans. We have just announced another $2 million in commitments to loans that will be focused on the wildfire areas. So we are somewhat unusual as a Fortune 100 non-bank, and Nicole, you had mentioned earlier how banks invest in CDFIs, and the reason for that is because they have CRA credit, Community Reinvestment Act requirements that basically compel them to invest in CDFIs in order to get that. We have no such thing. We are not incentivized by that. We are incentivized by the fact that we could build up the communities which we serve, where our customers live and work, where our employees live and work. We are going to be digging up streets with laying our fiber and hanging it from poles in the air. And therefore, we always consider ourselves to be a local company, even though we're nationwide and we serve 41 states and blah, 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 and all that jazz. It's irrelevant, because when we're in your home, we are the company that is local to you. And that is why we want to support those underserved communities, to use that term. I don't know if it's the right one yet, today, tomorrow, whenever, but underserved communities within our network. And across the nation, we have created over 5,100 jobs. We have made over 1,200 loans. We have financed over $60 million worth of loans to small businesses. And we have found a way as a corporation to make these loans and develop intimate relationships with the CDFIs that we invest in, as well as the end user borrowers that they then lend the money to. And we use those small businesses in our events and catering and social events, and however we can, we make commercials for them. We're not just investing dollars, we're also providing airtime. There are other ways and other resources that, whether it's Charter Communications and the resources it has, or any other corporation and the resources that corporation has, can be used as part of the investment. So we have been very successful, so far, and we are looking to continue to grow. Again, we just announced another $2 million commitment in the LA area for the wildfires. We are investing more on the East Coast in North and South Carolina that have been devastated by hurricanes. And again, we are building out our rural network across the nation and following up with investments in CDFIs to invest in the small businesses within those rural areas as well. So we're putting our money where our mouth is. We want to be an example for other corporations that read the term community investment, and we want to help them think creatively beyond just the contribution or the donation, to think how they can directly invest in their communities. So that's why I'm here today.
It's a great overview, and I think it's good for us to remember LA and the LA region is a small business capital, I think, of the world. There's more small business new starts here than anywhere. And I think that encompasses a vast industry that Dr. Perez probably walks through your doors every day at this school, you know, burgeoning entrepreneurs, new ideas. I myself am a product of the California Community College District. Go Chafee Panthers, I think? I forget, I'm getting old. But, you know, in that scheme, I think we can take a different look at this revitalization question about how we're nurturing the talent pipeline and how we're building up this talent pipeline to compete for jobs. You know, so what are some of the programs and efforts that you're looking to do in terms of employer engagement or career pathways? How is ELAC positioning itself to nurture that talent pipeline in any number of sectors and skill developments?
Thank you, Matt. I think this revitalization is very connected to coordination and collaboration between educational institutions and the capital and access to capital, the CDFIs and others. First of all, I want to welcome you. I'm the interim president of ELAC. I'm born and raised right down the street here, so I'm a local boy. And I want to thank all my ELAC family that are here, Dean Rios and others. I also want to recognize my colleague, Dr. Keith Curry from Compton College, does a lot of work with LAEDC. So we have been working very hard at the community colleges to be nimble, flexible, and innovative. And so before I get to some of the occupations, which I really want to talk about, the Senator Rubio gift to our ELAC Foundation of $2.5 million to create an incubator and center for entrepreneurship here at ELAC for our students, but also for the community. So thank you so much, Senator Rubio, and the ELAC Foundation is here with my executive director, and the board chair is here watching this, and we're really excited about that opportunity. First of all, you know, I've been with community colleges in 2004 in senior administrative positions. I've watched the community college evolve into what it is today. When I started, we were transfer. We didn't do a lot of workforce stuff generally, unless you were, you know, specified to do so, like LA Trade Tech. But now, over the years, here we are in 2025, we are poised to be the workforce generator, training people for these new emerging jobs and occupations. And let me give you the reasons why I think that we'll put in place. First of all, we need to revitalize enrollment. I mean, yes, the wildfires has dampened our enrollment, but before that, the pandemic dampened our enrollment. A lot of students didn't come to school because of the pandemic. We are nowhere near the population we were in 2017. So we're trying our best to revitalize enrollment, both remote and in person. So it's a big issue. The other thing is workforce and our coordination with the workforce, both public and private sector jobs that are out there. And then the other thing we've done is K-12. And one of the things that you've seen is the governor has pushed, and there is the career technical or career education master plan for K-12 and higher education, which he has just announced. And there are many aspects of it. But one of the things is we're getting rid of a lot of hurdles that students have and individuals have to get to jobs. For instance, credit for prior learning. We're making it more available now, and we're doing our work. If somebody comes to us with a skill set, whether they're vets or working in an occupation, we're going to give them credit so that they can get their credential at a much more streamlined, faster time. So that's another change that's taking place. The other is our funding formula, which now gives us additional dollars, not just because of enrollment, but because of outcomes. How many are graduating? How many are getting Pell? How many are getting living wage jobs? And if you do that, and your metrics are there, you're going to get funding. for that, those outcomes. They were also getting funding for supplemental. How many equity points are you getting? For instance, AB 540, college promise students who need to take 12 units, you get points for that. The reason why I bring that up is we are geared towards serving the community. And I know we kind of danced around it a bit, but we're concerned because of DEIA limitations that may impact our ability to make sure equity is brought, because that's what community colleges are all about. We're the engine of equity. That's why we're created in the first place. I remember when I started, we didn't even have tuition. It was free. And it's still free for low-income students who qualify. So, having said all that, I want to say that we would love to work directly and coordinate with Capital, particularly in our Center for Entrepreneurship Incubator, getting our faculty in the business department to be poised to interact with these charter and others to prepare our students and community to be able to access. You talked about the magic dust and being prepared to go to CDFI. Well, that's what we're going to do here at ELAC. We're going to make sure that those people that come to us with those innovative ideas in Southern California, in LA, will be able to access your capital. We'll prepare them. That's one of the things we're going to be able to do. And then finally, I want to say that we need to be poised and nimble as instructional designers. My faculty are great. They're content experts, but they don't always know how to design something that meets the need of employers. And so one of the things we're pushing, and is happening quite a bit, is in the non-credit arena. The non-credit arena is growing in community colleges, meaning we can be flexible and develop instructional programs and training that meet the exact needs of the employers as of today and the future.
Those are industry certificates, correct?
Yes, industry certificates, we can do that. So there's that nimbleness. So I'll end with that's kind of where we're going, and look forward to collaborating and coordinating with the private sector and the public sector.
That's an amazing jump up. So I wanted to throw a scenario out to this panel. I think this revitalization scope and scheme, I think if everyone remembers Shannon's presentation from a bit earlier, that slide that showed some of our key industries and where their growth trajectories are going, we're all kind of moving in one direction with one key industry moving in the wrong direction, and that's manufacturing. And when we think about manufacturing, LA in this region used to be the prime hub of manufacturing, everything that comes in through the 10 and the Union Pacific corridor, all the way to the port, all the way out. And I think that's waned a bit. So when we look at that scenario around revitalization, how do we attract, how do we grow, how do we support new jobs, let's just say in manufacturing moving forward? You talked, Dr. Perez, about partnerships. Jeffrey, you talked about capital deployment for certain industries. Nicole, you talked a bit about how the CDFI loan fund can be leveraged for entrepreneurs. But how do we think about this revitalization engine in terms of more broad industries scope? What can we pull together to coordinate the signals that revitalize, let's say, manufacturing in any one sector, that support more living wage jobs, that have needed infrastructure investments, that have talent pipeline kind of concentrations that we need to focus on? What is something like that we need to pull together? Anybody who wants to jump in?
I'll jump in first. It's really easy, Matt, when the federal government dictates what they want to focus on. So when I joined GoBiz pre-pandemic, it was all about clean energy. And Director Guzman at the time was like, hey, we're drilling down into this clean energy, electrification, hydrogen, we're going to go into this, we have all these mandates. And so it was very easy from the state side to align ourselves and to build programs that support that, right? So through Innovation Hub programming, LA Clean Tech Incubator being one of our grantees, the fact that the federal government had this as an initiative, I would imagine played a part into my review committee, selecting them as an innovation hub. And so it's easy, that's the ideal scenario, but in our current climate right now, I think our message from the state is that we're going to continue to push forward in the areas that we've targeted as priority sectors for the region, obviously manufacturing, clean energy, agriculture.
You think California can step in where the federal government may retreat on certain sectors like green energy, green manufacturing, other stuffs that they don't seem to want to fund anymore?
That's a tough one. I think from the perspective of, I don't think that, maybe some of the funds as it relates to things like the CHIPS Act, right? Some of those funds, that could be on the chopping block, but I think the overall concept of what we're trying to do here in California, we may have to look at some alternative ways to accomplish those goals, but it's like, we're so far down the road in this, it's like really difficult for me to visualize us kind of pulling away as a state. But I think that's the dilemma right now is, what is our pivot point and how are we going to do that?
Any takeaways, Nicole? Any thoughts on that scenario?
So a couple of different points. So around manufacturing, as you were talking, Matt, I was remembering when I worked for Mayor Villaraigosa, I worked in economic development, and we had different sectors that we focused on. Manufacturing was one of the sectors that I focused on. And I'm from Chicago, but having been in Angelino for 20 years, I was not aware of how dense and how broad our manufacturing hub is here in LA. At the time, we were focused on apparel, on toy, and furniture manufacturing. But it was eye-opening, and I would go and visit manufacturers all the time. I would walk their floors all the time. And so now, being at LISC, we fund a lot of businesses that are a lot of apparel businesses that are sort of soup to nuts. So literally, and we fund a lot of commercial property acquisition. So they're buying a property to bring everything in-house. And we've been really successful there. And we're looking at a deal right now for another business that is just the same, where they're doing textiles all the way to fulfillment under the same roof. And that is magical fairy dust. That's amazing to be able to do all of that in-house. You're going to have a good number of employees doing that. You've got many ways to manage the cost of the business when you've got everything in-house, and so we really like to see that. It sort of mitigates some of the risk of having your manufacturing in China or wherever, but it's not under your roof and you're not able to manage that cost. So we love to do that. We do a lot of that work, sort of helping apparel, mostly entrepreneurs that are bringing everything in-house. And it's an amazing thing to go in and see textiles here, design there, manufacturing here, and then the fulfillment shop, going out the front door. So manufacturing absolutely has its place in Los Angeles. The way that we see it is not as sort of a standalone part of the industry, but it's an important part of the supply chain for many of the entrepreneurs that we finance. Green energy. It's an interesting moment that we're having right now. My team at LISC LA, we don't have any federal funding, but nationally, LISC receives a lot of federal funding. And we got that very interesting letter from the Office of Management and Budget.
We all got that letter.
And that letter was very pointed in what the federal government is no longer interested in supporting. And green energy was called out in that letter. And so even though the letter has been pulled back, the concern that it created remains. And so I think we're kind of in a wait and see moment around how do we support green policies. At LISC, we have a whole division called LISC Green. We just brought in the president of that division probably about 6 months ago. And the intention was for him to work on GGRF funding, which, at the end of the Biden administration, the dollars were already the awardees were already chosen. We were awarded along with Habitat and Enterprise. Those dollars were sitting in an escrow account, and now those dollars are untouchable. So I think the reality is that we've got to kind of wait and see where this goes, and sort of take those steps as they become clearer. The thing is that they sort of change every day, and so you just got to be super nimble super agile. And I think if that's the business that you're in, sort of understand how to sort of navigate around the moment that we're in. It might mean that you change your language. It might mean, so as we think about green energy, we think about sort of retrofitting commercial and residential properties in LA, and we talk more about sort of saving those businesses and those families on energy costs. We don't talk about it as climate change. And so even just changing the language can be helpful in navigating the moment that we're in. So I would say going against the federal government, I'm going to tell you right now, we don't have interest in that because we are a national organization that covers the political spectrum. We've got 38 local offices that operate in urban blue regions, and we also have LISC rural that operates in very red regions of this state and of this country. And I would say within my 14-member team, I cover the political spectrum and, you know, who people support. So we are an organization that's got to sort of walk the line out of respect for our employees, our communities, et cetera. And so the way that we're going to do that is to be very nimble and be very agile. And I would say that for entrepreneurs, that's what this moment is. It's the moment to be nimble and to sort of work that muscle.
We're lightning around time, so any final thoughts, Jeff, on the nimbleness or this moment?
Sure, to bring together the concept of focusing on manufacturing with being nimble. We've been very fortunate. Many people think of manufacturing concerns as too large to be classified as small businesses. We've been very fortunate in that we have financed many manufacturing concerns that are small businesses, where a $50,000 to $150,000 loan does help develop a distribution center.
Absolutely.
And it has been something that we are able to focus on and be nimble enough to continue to be able to focus on. If we want to focus on one particular sector, we can choose to do so. But so far, we've been very successful focusing across the board in terms of the industries we finance.
Amazing.
Just one final thought, Matt, I know people are leaving, but Los Angeles Regional Consortium has 19 community colleges in LA County. We're nimble, ready to go. If manufacturing, as you say, distribution center and others come to bear, we have 19 colleges ready to step it up and make sure we provide the workforce you need.
Absolutely true. Nicole, take it out.
Sorry. I just had one quick point. The point that you were making just now about manufacturing and being able to support a manufacturing business with $50,000 to $100,000 loan and being able to get right at a particular manufacturing business. While we focus on the apparel or the toy entrepreneur that's got manufacturing as part of their supply chain, that's what I mean by the ecosystem. So when you're looking for opportunity, try to look to see what you need and then which CDFI, MDI, et cetera, can support that. Because there's different things that we can support, but we make up the total ecosystem. And what I see a lot is that someone may come to LISC, find out that you don't qualify for whatever it is, and then you sort of give up on the ecosystem altogether. The ecosystem around CDFIs, loan funds, et cetera, is super broad. So just figure out what it is that you need and then sort of be willing to contact 10 of us to get there.
And maybe a platform like LAEDC can help with
100%.
With a more broad project pipeline, with some technical assistance that can coordinate all these opportunities, and while engaging employers on some of the skills necessary. It sounds like we need some of that connective tissue infrastructure to provide at least that platform and vehicle.
Great point.
Thank you all for joining us. Please make your way back to the auditorium for the governor's speech. I thank you for your time and hope to be part of the future.
That was awesome.